Good morning, everyone. My name is Maaike. I'm with Evie van Landschot in Amsterdam. Today we're going. Well, first of all, I want to welcome you. Thanks for coming to the 9 a.m. panel on the last day. Today we're going to talk to you about testing in email design, which is something we love to talk about. Apart from talking about football. Today's panel is not about why we should do testing. We all know we should be testing. We talked about it yesterday and the day before. So it's really about sharing with you our experiences. And that's why I have with me today Florin and Mick. Maybe you can start off with a short introduction and include, as a first question, what is your strategic view on testing?
I don't know if I'm the best person to give the opinion about testing. My name is Florin. I'm managing a group of publishers. We also work as an agency. What we do is personalized email. So my opinion on testing is that it is difficult to do. If you are not doing it in a consistent way, you can implement some changes that are not going to reflect positive results in the long run. And if you're doing a lot of thousands of versions of emails, it's really difficult to test a design. It's more simple to test an idea. Actually, I think Della mentioned this idea on Tuesday. Sometimes if you limit yourself in testing just, let's say, an HTML, there are so many logistic problems that, as Chiara was saying, 8 languages, different formats. It's not easy to done. Of course, it's very important to do it. And of course, only by using data, you can challenge your intuition and do better emails.
Hi, I'm Mick Conetta from Arsenal Football Club. And testing, I think it's an interesting concept because I think email is very good for being able to measure the success of any campaign. So actually testing forms part of your measurement of your activity. So I think there's a lot of rabbit holes you can go down with testing, and as Florin just said about, it can be complicated, but it should form part, and you should be measuring all your activity and understanding what's working and what isn't, and also have the ability to test, but test in the right areas to make sure that you're focused on getting the right outcomes for your campaigns.
Right, so when we talk about how testing is important but not easy, how do you determine what to test, apart from proving your boss wrong when you have an argument?
I think that the most important thing to avoid is when you can do so many errors while you are testing. And the most common ones are the error size sample. You're choosing a not representative or smaller sample, and then you want to generalize the results and it's not working. For example, many times it happens that people are not testing in equal conditions or equal context. So they say, I sent this email on Monday and the other one on Tuesday. That's not going to work. It's not an equal-based test. I think that's what I'm saying. It's difficult to do when you have. We're sending 12 million emails every day. So it's better to have an idea, test it across a significant part of that volume, let's say 10% of all that volume, but at least a significant sample size, and test it not in one moment, test it during a longer period of time, and then you can maybe generalize the result.
Yeah, and I'd add to it, there's so many elements around what makes a successful campaign. And, in football, it's an interesting concept because you have to take into account the mood of the fan base and understanding whether or not they want to engage with your content. whether you've won 5-1 at the weekend or lost 3-0. So that has a huge impact on any planning that we do or my team does into the campaigns. But there's so many elements. Is it the data that you're testing? Is it the subject line? Is it the creative? Is it the copy? So what we try and do is build in all of those factors into our campaign. So my team have to work across multiple different brands. So we not only do we support our internal businesses, but we also have to do creative copy for our partners. So it really depends on what that element is, because we'll be testing the base, and it's not just about one size fits all for every client. So we work out what is the right thing to do and how much effort do we need to put into that campaign to really show the results. And I know we talked about it earlier on in this week, but we've also introduced a segmentation for our UK fan base. And so it's also using that to drive some of the creative changes. And I've got a few examples that I'll show at the end of this conversation.
Yeah, I would actually like to continue on that, because we know that testing is all about increasing results. So I don't know if we can put the slide up now or if that's for after, but maybe you can at least share with us some success stories that you've something that you've done, and tell us something about the results. I don't know if everyone can...
Yeah, sure. Is there a clicker somewhere? Yeah, there should be. Oh. You're going to click for me? Sure, right? Okay, I'll try and run through this quite quickly. But okay, so this is just something, and I know it was mentioned earlier on in the week around using personas, but as a football club, we introduced personas at the start of last season. So, and really just looking at our UK fan base, because a lot of people focus on the 60,000 people that will come to the stadium, but we actually have 2 million households in the UK, and so not everyone comes to the stadium. So it's important to change the way that we thought about our fan base. So we've got 7 personas here. I'm not going to spend too much time going through them, but as you would expect, Arsenal Football Club is based in London, so we skew towards a more affluent fan base than other clubs in the UK. So there's quite a focus on the affluence and what that drives for our partners. And then obviously we created 7 segments. So we work with BT Sport, which is obviously a sports channel in the UK that have rights to the Premier League. So previously they were targeting everyone on our database that they could with just a generic campaign. Same offer for everyone. So if you were a Sky customer, you got the offer. If you're already a BT Sports customer, you got the offer. So as you can imagine, sending an offer to a BT Sports customer is not going to really generate you much business. So we decided to create different email groups for these. And as you can see, if you can just see that, we've got lots of people here that were, engaged and signed up, confused existing customers, irrelevant offers, didn't sign up, not interested, and customers of different providers. So what do we do now? So we have a segmentation portal which we give access to. We work with Experian, so they can use that information to understand more about the fans they're targeting. So we were able to then use who's your current provider to have a understanding of, are they more likely to have BT, Sky, and some of the other competitor products. And as you can see at the bottom, so then we looked at our segments to say which ones are more likely to have BT Sport. And really just some subtle changes into our creative. So instead of just saying one generic offer, we went out with either you could get BT Sport and BT free with BT Infinity, and then changing that also to a Sky customer offer. So effectively, very simple steps, and then we just needed to measure that result. And what you can see is, obviously, it drove, open rate wasn't massive, but click-through rate went up by 1%, but actually the reactivity within the campaign, so actually the amount of clicks and the engagement in the campaign went up significantly. And what we did is, through that campaign, generating an additional 2,000 clicks for BT and uplift on the campaign by 426%. So quite a significant uplift by just taking some simple steps to test the use of the data within that campaign. Another one that we did, and excuse the former players in the creative. Transfers do get in the way of a good creative, but this was a couple of years ago. We did a campaign. On the left-hand side was a generic creative we used to send, and on the right-hand side, we just used the segmentation and the personas to change the imagery. So as you can see, we've got generic kit products, and on the right-hand side, very subtle change, targeting it at a family group. We put some children's kit on it. And as you can see on the right, all our segments, you can see the click rates on the first campaign, the click rates on the second campaign, and overall, just by changing 3 images, we got a campaign uplift of 15%. So our click-throughs went up, and we sent an additional 1,600 people through to the store. So not massive numbers, but what you can see is excuse me, big night. So what you can see is the just very, very simple changes drove that behaviour. And then finally, I'm not sure if you're able to click on the right image. Yeah, should just the play button. They freeze them in Giroud. But what we did here is that goal last year, Giroud won the Puskas Award, which was the best goal of the year. And what we did very quickly using Live Clicker was our media team created this image that they put out on social, and we embedded that in an email campaign that we sent out with our kit manufacturer, Puma, and very quickly took that video, put it into a creative, went out and promoting Giroud, who was luckily a Puma player, and he was wearing the boot, so obviously buy the boot and you could score a goal like that. So, yeah, exactly. So, yeah. And again, you can see what you're driving there is dwell time in the email and just a very engaging way of using that email communication to take something. And what we find is working with our players, it's not rocket science at a football club, although when we work with our partners, we have to educate them. It's our fans engage, obviously, with content that has players in. So when you send out a campaign, if you're not really referencing the connection with the club, then people aren't going to engage. But you'd still be surprised the amount of copy that we get given, which doesn't resonate with a football fan, it's not right for the audience, the subject lines are dry, the copy is dry, and then obviously they wonder why the campaign doesn't work. So, yeah, very simple things. It's just examples of how we've done it at Arsenal.
Florian, I think you have some examples that would you like to share with us too?
Yes, actually I sent the slides to Jeff. I don't know if he can put them.
Yeah, okay. Maybe you can kick off and then we'll put the slides up.
They are not obviously that interesting and attractive as Arsenal. No problem. One of the most interesting tests that we did, it should have mentioned it yesterday in the cross channel, but we got the idea out of behavioral psychology of priming. I don't know if somebody's familiar with that, maybe Linda. The idea is, if I ask you, how was your day? And I ask you, did you have a good night yesterday? On average, you'll give me a slightly better answer. The two questions are not exactly related, are not consequential, but this is how we work. But if I ask you, do you have a headache from drinking too much, you're probably giving me a worse answer. So we wanted to test the idea in email. And what we did is we took 1 million people that were about to receive a campaign of wine e-commerce from Spain. So before that, a few days before, the campaign was scheduled on a Friday, we impacted them with a positive mention about the brand in Facebook using custom audience. So we had 750,000 people that were included in the custom audience and saw the mention, the post about how about the brand, and we have a 250,000 control group that didn't see the campaign. And the results were quite surprising because we had actually decimals in difference between opening rates and click rates of both segments. But in conversion rates, we had like 30% more conversion rates for the people that saw just days before a positive mention about that brand. And I think this kind of ideas are
Which one? Are these from your links?
no, there's a PowerPoint attached.
Not in what came this morning.
Okay. Okay. No problem. Another thing that we tested that was a strategy error that we think. We were doing triggered emails. For example, if you are in Barcelona and you clicked on an offer of an Argentinian restaurant, we used to send you more restaurants in the same zip code. And we were thinking in terms of category. And that worked really well for local content, for offers that were local. But we applied the same idea or the same strategy to travel. So you were clicking on a trip to Menorca, and we were sending you trips to the Canarias. So it's the same category, islands, travel to a close island, but it was not exactly what people were expecting. So obviously didn't work. So in order to improve that, we used an idea that both Amazon and Netflix had a while ago. I think most of you will be familiar with that. It's called collaborative filtering. It's like setting up a matrix of all the users and all the offers, and just selecting the offer that other users, after somebody saw an offer, just propose them offers that were saw by other people that saw the same offer. That really improved the click-through rate in the campaign by 35%, if I recall correctly. I'm sorry for the slides. I am. Yeah.
Well, I think it was pretty clear story. So, guys, thanks for sharing that. We see some great results coming from testing. So, which metrics do you look at? A test we did at AV last summer, and AV is in financial services, was for every deposit you would get a gift, and we did an email campaign. Where in the one version we said, if you make a deposit, this is your gift, and then please click through to your login page to make the deposit. And in the other version, we said, if you make a deposit, you will get a gift. Click here to see what your gift is. Well, I guess it won't be a surprise that the click rates in the second version were much higher because people were very curious to see what the gift was. And then across the department, everybody was very excited, like, okay, this is an email that we should use more often because the clicks are higher. And then we actually looked a bit further to see how many deposits actually came from the two different emails. And we separated prospects and current customers. And then we saw from the deposits that actually the second version worked a lot better for prospects that were like surprised to see, oh, they're going to get a gift. And for customers, they were actually quite irritated. They're like, I'm a current customer. I just want to see what you're going to give to me if I'm going to make the deposit. So they actually responded better to the first version. We also combined it with some other data where we saw in the feedback tool that we have in our email that there were more complaints coming from customers with the version where they didn't see the gift. So I was wondering if you could share with us, how do you decide which metric to look at, and how do you decide on success?
The one that makes us look good. All joking aside, when we're looking at retail campaigns, to the discussion that we had yesterday, it's not just about measuring what's available through your email tool, but it's we do associative analysis. So what we do is we will look at anyone that's purchased. If we do a retail campaign, for example, we'll take a set window, and then we'll say anyone that purchases after seeing the email or receiving the email and has engaged with the email, we will then associate that value of that order, because we know that people will browse on their phone, they'll put it down, they may go back, and they may go into their office, so they get the email on the way to work, they go, that's a good offer, get them to the office, and then go and buy. So within our group, we obviously look at leads passed through arsenal.com through to our retail store, and obviously people that engage directly through the email. We also track all of the activity that happens on our estate, so we're able to recognise individuals and then bring together their interaction history with the club down to the individual levels. So we know what path they've taken to buy and acquire. So we know that if they received an email and they were active after that email, that was a result of them being engaged by the club, as opposed to just coming onto the site sporadically based on some form of engagement. So that's how we do it for most of the retail customers. Where we work with our partners, it really depends on how much access we have to their digital estate. Some partners allow us to build landing, or we work with them to build landing pages, so we can then analyse the traffic that's being generated and driven. Other partners just want to execute their right, and so actually sending the email campaign is all they're interested in doing. So it really depends on the sophistication of the customer, and every time we do a campaign, we try and work and agree the set of objectives and then measure against those objectives. So whether it's about getting views on a video, pushing out people to an event, or selling product, we measure, and we measure against the objectives we put at the start.
So as publishers, we have to take care of two interests. Well, one is the advertiser, that always the final objective is more sales. And the other one is the final user, the consumer. No? So the consumer would like more relevance. I know that relevance and engagement are very broad concepts. We had that conversation with Della. So in our case, for example, we did some errors in focusing on a single KPI, like, for example, revenue per click. That was important for us, not for the advertiser, not for the user. And when you're only focusing on that, it's easy to do mistakes, because we compared, that was a test that we did with live intent. So we had two content recommendation units that were right at the bottom of the email. One were using related content similar to Taboola. I don't know if you probably saw it, because it's on all no problem. It's in all websites at the end. They are somehow annoying and not really related with the content, but there is sometimes that they get something really similar to what the user was seeing. And at the end of a 1-month test, we decided that Taboola-like content was not really good, because it didn't bring us, the revenue per click was 4 times less than in the standard ads. So we decided to eliminate that. But then at a closer look, we practically obtained the same revenue from both type of banners, because the revenue per click was 4 times lower, but the click rate, so it was 4 times more attractive for the user. So in the end, by multiplying the two things, so my answer to your question is always take into account that you have like at least triple responsibility for your company, but also for the final consumer, and that's the relevance. And if you are working as a publisher, at least for the advertiser that's moving the campaign.
All right, I guess as a final question, we've talked a lot about what's good and what to do, but can you also share something with us, what can go wrong and how to prevent it?
Well, that's a wide question. I think...
Take one thing.
I mean, most of, I think the challenges we have always been, has the right audience received the creative that you've intended to send? So, yeah, like anyone, the people that are sending out the content are only human. So what we try and do is we have robust QA procedures around making sure that, you know, the data selections are signed off, the creative and copy are signed off, and then making sure the right copy is assigned to the right target groups. But obviously, when you start building tests into plans and you're building in dynamic, we've started using data-driven creative, so really taking elements of creative copy and then assigning that into an email template based on the data selection. So the more complex your campaigns are, then you need to have more robust QA procedures to make sure that each step is being approved along the way. But yeah, I mean, mistakes still happen. Campaigns go out to the wrong audiences or potentially at the wrong time. And yeah, we're just about to start our renewals process, and you know, we have data latency around people that are renewing their season tickets and they receive an email to ask why they haven't received one. So all of those things still happen, and it's about being able to be quite transparent with the business stakeholders around the processes that we take as a team to make sure that we try and stop all mistakes. But obviously, it's not always 100%.
I think that we are all very smart people in the room. And our teams probably are the same. But you can always... we are human in the end, so as Mick was saying, we frequently do errors, and while we are relying on intuition, we are doing more errors. That's why important is to measure everything. I think that's probably the most important way of not screwing up a campaign, is to have very good tools and a good at least, I mean, if you are doing an error, you haven't seen it before sending the email, just being able to fix it and not repeating the same error over and over again. So for that, we need good tools, I think, at least in terms of email design. Everybody should take a look at Litmus and all the rendering and email analysis tools. Another good tool is Email on Acid. It's a competitor of Litmus that we are using, but there are now, in terms of subject lines or pre-headers and everything, there's a lot of tools like Frasi, but also Alchemy Works has a tool. So we got better as people by using better tools. We just need to use it constantly, rationally, and that's my take.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. So I want to open it up for questions from the audience. I have a question. When do you determine, after you've been doing these tests, that to stop testing? Like you mentioned, you could go down the rabbit hole. When do you feel like, okay, this was good, we improved, and then now it's time to move on?
Yeah, so if we do testing, we'll do, you know, like for example, an A/B test on every campaign. I tell my team you can never do too much testing, so you should always be testing something. And also, if you're not following an official testing strategy, you're still analysing, was that campaign a success? So basically, that's the test, right? Because if the campaign doesn't work, then something's not working. So I don't think you ever really stop testing, because there's just so many different factors and variables that impact a campaign. But formally, we try and do 1 or 2 tests, and then we roll out to, you know, the most successful one that we've seen. Yeah.
What I think is that novelty plays a big role in advertising. So every new idea works very well at the beginning of its implementation. So you test it, you put it in practice, but one of the biggest errors that you can do is to use it in all possible cases. So my opinion is that even if you saw a great increment in you had a very successful test, don't apply it in 100% of the cases, because you create like a vicious circle, so it will stop working in a very short period of time. So you need to always leave space for other types of creatives or whatever you are testing, so that users can show you that there are also other ways of communicating with them that are good for them, that are relevant.
And just to add, I think if you add too many elements to your tests, how do you know what's working? Because was it the data, was it the creative, was it the copy? You know, it's really hard to then say that was the reason why that campaign was a success.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah. So Albert from TNT FedEx. I have a question for Mick. I used to work for the Royal Dutch Soccer Association, and I had huge problems when sponsors wanted to do a campaign on that base, especially when it was about testing. So if you get that resistance, how do you react? How do you convince them to do the test, and what's in it for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the challenge is always the sponsor has got a right and they want to activate that right, but what we try and educate them on is it's not just about the execution of the right, it's about engaging the fan base in the right way, because ultimately they're interested in driving an engagement with their brand. So what we try and do is just build out use cases, work with them, and just say, and we advise them. Ultimately, it's their decision. So what we do is we'll say, this is what we think will work. And then if they say, well, we're going to ignore you and we'll do something else, then we say, fine. And then we use that in the results analysis to go back to them. But we always try and say, if a sponsor or a brand is insistent on doing something their way, then we ask them, would they allow us to do a test? And then we'll just do a 50-50 split. We'll do it how they want to do the copy and how we do. And we don't get it right all the time, but majority of the time, they then come around to our way of thinking.
We had the same issue a number of times. So we had recently a campaign with Air France, and a unique selling proposition was 20 euros discount that they were insisting on using for a ticket with Air France. So that's not really significant for people. When you think about traveling with Air France, you think how much could it be a ticket? Let's say the cheapest one would be 300, so what's 20 euros? We were insisting on putting the price of the cheapest flight, and actually that worked way better than -20. But sometimes you don't have an option, because they say, no, I will invest this budget, so I would like to test my idea. It's their share of responsibility toward the bad result.
Okay, one more question, yeah.
Hi, Amir from Qatar Airways. And I would like to know, what would you say to this, if I say to you that most of this testing results in sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like either we are trying to confirm one of our hypotheses, or if in case of our bosses, we are trying to reject it. And mostly that. So what would you say it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy?
I would say that you are right. The short answer. No, but that happens all the time. We had the idea of testing, of sending emails at the best possible hour for each of our customers. And what's the best possible hour that we saw in the data? Was the hour at which we used to send emails. So it was like what we are trying to measure here. Since we didn't send before at any hour to any customer during a consistent period of time, you cannot get to incorporate that good of a knowledge out of that. Yes, practically, that's why I was saying at the beginning that sometimes testing is not, can lead you to a not useful path, because you practically take an idea that was not exactly the cause, it was correlated but not a causality, and you try to convince yourself that this thing caused the other thing. So that's my take on it.
So what are we talking about here? Because now we talked about not going down the rabbit hole, and I always find myself going down that hole, actually. And because how much is too much? Now, in any given situation, we know maybe, with all our marketing understanding and all, I think we know 5% of the situation. Yeah? And within that 5%, we are assigning a cause to something, where there's 95% of the information that is always hidden from us. We have not been sending people at all the 24 hours. Within those 24 hours, we've not been sending them to all the 60 minutes. When you said, you know, what worked on Sunday might not work on Monday, there's going to be a difference of weekends. And then there's going to be a sunny day outside, and there's going to be a not sunny day outside. So how would we implement the learning that we have done? Because, to actually quote Mark, as soon as we make a persona, we are wrong. So as soon as we are done testing, it's history. And of that history, we know very little of, actually.
But Amir, the answer is in this room. The answer is diversity. If we use multiple strategies, we cannot get wrong all the times. So the answer is, let's variate the ways we communicate and we impact each user, and on average, we'll get better results.
Yeah, and I'll just add, it's about marginal gains, which sounds more like a football term than it does about an email term, but you know, you can prove that these things work. But it's important not to overemphasize on it, because everyone's got restricted resources, right? So your team is only so big and you can only do so much. And you set out around what that campaign is looking to do, and then whether or not you can uplift that campaign and basically decide whether or not it's worth testing. So we don't test everything, but if we have the option to do it, you know, when do we use our, for example, when do we put live clicker into our content, and when don't we? Because you can't, every creative can't have that type of content. So, you know, it's around finding that right engagement level and that sweet spot with our customer base and our fan base.
There's also a Japanese concept that applies here. It's called Kaizen. So it's continual improvement. So if every day we are just 0.5 better than the other day, in the long run we are way, way, way better than. So you need to test also your I think, the ideas that seem wrong. Sometimes you will see that I mean, most of the times intuition fails.
Back here, one more. Mr. Della.
Hi, guys. Actually, I just wanted to add to that point. Every email you send is a test, or an opportunity to test or learn from. Every bad email you send, every mistake is a test that you can learn on. If you were supposed to send it on a Monday and you weren't ready and it went on a Tuesday, that's a day of the day test. So the point is, the answers are all in the data, in the historical data. I view it like a gold mine. The gold is there, but you've got to move through a lot of crap to get it. And complicated in that is what we're doing to our audience, right? So you said, our best day is the day we send it. Well, you've created a habit in your audience that does it, and separating what you're doing from what they're doing can be quite difficult. The one thing consistently I would say is anything you do different will get you a lift. And that's the biggest challenge when you're looking at testing. You do a test, it's different, you get a lift, right? And you go, I'm going to assign the causality to the AB rather than the fact that it was just the change. The second thing, to your point, Mike, is that some people respond very well to the test and others badly. So net, you may have a 5% lift or 10% lift or whatever it is, but on one section, it's a minus 30%. It's just it was really big on the other. So you have to look actually deeper within the data to find it out. That's a rat hole. That's a rabbit hole. You can go mad trying to figure out in advance what that is. But if you say, okay, I know these happen. So every time I send an email, part of the goal is to analyze the results of that email as if it was a test. So you go and say, which segments did it work better with? Which didn't it work better with? Oh, when I change, I get a lift on average of 5% or 10%. So a test that's a change that has to be more than 5 or 10% for you to perceive it to be good. And it goes back to the point I made on the first day. You have to know your data on a daily basis. Make the data your friend. Make the results your friend, good, bad, or indifferent. And you will find that you suddenly start seeing things in the data that someone who comes for the first time could never see. And that's the best advice I could give you of testing. Everyone is testing every time they do anything, but they're not analyzing the results in the way they would a test. And that would be a piece of advice.
Thank you, Della. Okay, let's give these guys a round of applause.